If there's a way that we can start thinking about social media again as a place where we can gather and subtract the urgency about what we do from the need to be present with each other, social media becomes a really useful tool for flipping the script.
Welcome back to Social Media for Social Impact. I'm Misha, and on this show, we go beyond likes and clicks to explore how social media can drive real change. Today's guest is Tim Parsons, Senior Advisor at Idealist, and someone I first met at a conference on purpose in New York. The first conversation really stuck with me because Tim doesn't just talk about purpose, he lives it through roles that combine social impact, leadership, and community. And Tim also goes deep on themes like belonging and empathy, which are exactly what we need more of online. So today we'll explore how to bring those ideas to life into the way we build, connect, and create. Tim, thanks so much for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Misha. I am very excited to be here with you.
Awesome. I'd like to share with what drew you into this space of purpose-driven work and what you've been up to in the past years.
Sure. The funny story that I will go quickly through was I actually got hired out of a video store to take teenagers on international community service summer programs in Native communities in the US and abroad. So I went from a regular, air quotes, retail job to traveling and living inside other cultures, trading service work for learning about them and working side by side with them on projects that they chose and cared about. And it really, over the course of 12 years, was pretty deeply transformative to basically a kid from the East Coast to see the world in other people's eyes and to get that really interesting perspective on looking back at where I was from. We did a lot of very intentional work with the teenagers on those programs to help them foster a deeper sense of belonging with each other and the communities that we were working with. And I think the groundwork that got laid there has absolutely carried forward in all of my social impact work since then.
I love that. It's really fascinating because you've worked across different sectors. Looking back, what is a through line you see now that maybe wasn't clear at the time?
Yeah, that's a fun question. Later in life, I found the term generalist and the term squiggly career, which I really love. I think the thing that took me from job to job, from role to role, and from sort of organization to organization was really one of being truly like human first and making other people believe in themselves in the way that I believed in them. And it feels like that's not necessarily enough for a whole role inside of an organization. But if you apply that kind of helping other people rise to their best self and truly believe in them and see how they can all work together better, and you want to do it in service to a greater mission, it winds up being a pretty sort of utility skill. If I can digress really quickly on Adam Grant and his podcast, The Trouble with All Stars, I think he talks about this basketball team, the US All-Star Olympic team, that didn't do so well because it was just all these all-stars until they got a guy named Shane Battier, who his whole job was to help all of them play better together by not actually hogging the ball himself, but throwing it where it needed to go. And I think that's what I've done is go with care and empathy into helping lots of people figure out how to work better together. And it's just taken me forward step by step into different roles in different organizations.
Wonderful. That ability to see talent and connect and build community is something that has been in my mind since We met a few years ago. We've stayed in touch. I've been following along your journey. I know you've been a senior advisor at Idealist. Can you share a little bit about what that role looks like and what excites you about their mission?
Yeah, absolutely. Idealist is a piece of social impact infrastructure at this point. It's been around for like 20, 25 years as the sort of social impact jobs board that everybody who spends much time in the space probably spent some time on at some point in their career looking for a job. And it was founded actually by Ami Dar, who I think entertainingly, and I don't know if I'm going to get this exactly right. So, Ami, if you're listening, feel free to correct me. But he knew Craig from Craigslist, and he just wanted to find a way to help people take their step from intention to action. And how do I help anybody who's got a good idea and a desire to do something good connect with the things that they need to turn that good idea into meaningful action? And the first step was, oh, I can create a marketplace. I'm at the dawn of the internet. It's really easy to create a marketplace between people who have jobs doing good and people who want jobs doing good. But that was only ever supposed to be step one in a much larger sort of scope or ecosystem of anybody who wants to do something awesome should be able to connect with the other people, the resources, the community, the know-how to do more good with what they are, with whoever's around them, and with what they have. And I've really loved that. Let's start with the individuals wherever they are and not with necessarily the biggest organizations, but how do we help people who see themselves as somebody who wants to do something good, but just either doesn't know where to start or doesn't want to do it alone? How do we help them find and access that first step they can take into this larger ecosystem of organizations, of community, of neighbors? How do we just resource them to do more good stuff? And that's the journey that in the last 3 or 4 years, Idealist has really been focusing on, going from a social impact jobs board with a mission to becoming more of a movement that still includes a social impact jobs board. And in doing that, they have reached out and started to develop partnerships, started to lean into learning the hows and whys of what holds people back and how to give them more access. And this year, actually, they even went so far as to merge with Volunteer Match. So now it's not just jobs, it's also volunteer opportunities. So again, like expanding that reach of anything you need to do the things that you want to do to make the community around you or the world a little bit better. They're trying really hard to provide access and information and inspiration to do that. And I really love being part of helping to figure out how to make that happen and to build connections between the kind of people who are really excited to do that together.
Yeah, such important work. And one of the misconceptions in this space is that you need to have social impacts in your job title in order to provide value, right? Or to pursue environmental or social good. So, what would you say is one of the biggest things you've learned since you've been in the social impact space about providing value? And what are some misconceptions we can maybe start getting at while we're talking about this?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. I think most roles, most days, have some interaction with at least one other human being around us. And that the way that we choose to interact with even one other human being can have a pretty big ripple. And that sometimes I think we get lost in going for scale over depth. And that you never know how one interaction in whatever you're doing, or two or three or five, but some small number of deep interactions might ripple in ways that you don't know and can't anticipate. And so the idea of we need to do bigger numbers, I think sometimes gets in the way of looking for the ways that we can have the most impact right now, all day, every day in small ways. And that sometimes when you add up the number of little things that can be done over the course of a day, a week, a month, or to finish the Friends reference, even a year, versus trying really hard to build a machine that produces a lot of scale, it feels like maybe the thing that's going to make each of us in impact feel a little more resourced is doing little things for the people around us every day, and not even necessarily just an impact, but whatever you're doing, if you're nice and thoughtful and kind and curious to the people around you, that's honestly doing social impact work. You're having an impact on other people. You're doing the good sort of relational knitting that I feel like is really important right now in a world where trust is a little bit eroded, and I think is actually a resource that is getting strip mined with bad intention.
Absolutely. This is definitely part of a very large conversation. And I know you and I have talked about the noise online and the erosion of trust that happens on social media. Since we're talking on this show about using social media as a tool for social impact, where's the first place we can start using social media to build those intentional relationships and, to your point, have that human centered approach?
As somebody who has lots of ideas but will not claim answers, I would love to invite lots of conversations about this. Again, caveat. But I think one of the things that really strikes me and has struck me about Idealist is holding and shaping community designed to help people aspire to be the best, most affirming parts of themselves is really pretty special. How do you help people see and affirm each other? How do you build that into your social media practice so that, for example, one of the reasons that I really fell for Idealist in a I want to be part of it kind of way before COVID, there was and it still exists, but in a slightly more muted way. There is a Facebook group called Idealists of the World that's 40,000 people strong. And if you would go in there on an Idealist day, and it's fun, Idealist days are the days of the year where the day and the month are the same, so that it's the same no matter if you're in the US or abroad, 223344. If you go into the Idealists of the World Facebook group on Idealist Day, what you will see now is still really lovely. It's people from literally all over the world going in and wishing each other happy Idealist Day and sharing lovely pictures. In its biggest sort of most like loudest moment, and where we're actually trying to get back to in some other ways, was that people would actually share what they were doing in their communities, literally around the world, and share those on Idealist Day. And then other people who had self-identified as either idealists or willing to take that role on for a day, would go in and cheer each other on. So you would see everything from building a school in one community to putting in a well in another community to going to a school and talking with kids about ways that they can have impact in their community. But it was literally on all 7 continents. You could find ways that people were doing good things. So rather than us directing and being very one way in our social media, or even trying to create a relationship between us as idealists and these idealists of the world, we were encouraging them to find each other and hold each other up and be in relation to each other. And I feel like that is maybe the best thing that people with big audiences can do, is give people the gift of each other and encourage them to be in a relational sort of way that is focused on curiosity and kindness and affirmation, and finding that it is really something that feeds both the people who are engaged in giving the affirmation as well as the people receiving it. And then all of that goodwill accrues to whatever sort of convening entity held that space and holds that space safe for that kind of a relationship to happen. I think that's a really beautiful use of social media right now, is bringing people together in a way where they get to feel safe being aspirational versions of themselves.
That's really profound. And everything I'm hearing you share really combines the themes around belonging and empathy and just this human desire to be part of these communities. And it's such important work. Every time I talk with either current entrepreneurs or aspiring entrepreneurs that want to be in the social impact space, the first thing they ask me is which communities or networks can I be a part of, because I feel like I'm doing this work alone. And it feels so rewarding to find that community and see there's so many other people out there doing the work I do. Maybe they didn't know it has a name. Maybe they didn't know it's a social impact community or whatever the case may be. But it's one of the first things I really run into. So I'm super grateful you're doing this work for the community and talking about it, because I think a lot of times we're trying to build high impact initiatives in our silos, and we feel like we're struggling, and we talk about trying to break the barriers and trying to cut through all of the noise that's happening. It's really easy, Tim, to get sidetracked when you're trying to build something with purpose. It gets a little discouraging along the way sometimes.
I would 100% agree with that, Nisha. And the point of the urgency and burnout, it's actually something that I spent some time digging online, and I would love maybe talk about it from an academic standpoint. But the idea that we feel so much urgency right now collectively, and that's partly because of the abuse of the commons of trust that happens by bad actors trying to harvest urgency quickly for their own ends online. Somebody who's saying, act now or this terrible thing's going to happen, or you should be afraid of this thing, so we urgently need you to participate in this. Urgency, I think, is not a normal state for any of us to live in for any length of time. It just produces the kinds of chemicals that get in the way internally of being able to be present, to be open, to be nurturing to other people. But over time, like, you just stop being able to feel urgently about lots of things. So either you find the thing that lets you feel urgent, which is often related to anger or fear, or you just give up because that receptor in your body is burnt out. And urgency, when it's abused, even in the name of doing a good thing, right? Like, I need everybody to care right now about my thing. Collectively, if we all do that, what we start doing, I think, is start generating apathy almost as an industrial byproduct that makes it harder for people, to your point, to find or to be willing to go out and seek that connection. They're just so worn out from feeling the need to be urgent that if there's a way that we can start thinking about social media again as a place where we can gather and subtract the urgency from the need to be present with each other, while still acknowledging we all have to get things done, but maybe there just needs to be a place where we can all gather and not necessarily feel urgent all the time about what we do, and that social media becomes a really useful tool for flipping the script. Like, it used to be, I remember when social media started out online, like, I was working at a nonprofit at the dawn of like Twitter and the internet, that social media used to be a place where you talked about online what you had been doing offline. And now it feels more and more where you just talk about online and you've given up some of the offline activity. And so it becomes isolating and it becomes a whole separate universe unto itself. And it would be really interesting to me to work with people who really get and understand social media to talk about how do we do it so that it starts to go the other way, where we start using this amazing interconnected web of people to start finding ways to give people, again, the gift of being present with each other offline and doing, or offline adjacent, like trying to accomplish the same thing of building that web of connection between people in a way that feels relational instead of transactional, and safe instead of predatory, and calming and space making instead of feeling urgent.
A lot to unpack there, a lot of things I want to dive into and talk to you about because there's a lot happening in the online space. But I also want to ask you first to look at some of the clients or maybe brands online or organizations online, nonprofits you've been following, and give us an example of an organization that you feel is doing very impactful work and is able to combine it with their organizational goals and outcomes.
There's a really fun, smaller organization that I am very excited about right now, and it's led by an entrepreneur in Canada with a great name, Tasha Van Vlak, and it's called the Nonprofit Hive. And it is a really interesting use of the online space to create community among nonprofit leaders and practitioners, and more broadly, the social impact space, but in a way that is really, I think, novel and innovative. It doesn't have what most people would think of as the core component, the core required component of an online community. There is no forum. There is no Slack. There is no Discord. There is no sort of just place where people go to leave messages for each other. There is instead a very just wonderful group of people online, mostly on LinkedIn, who very much reinforce each other, but who use the mechanics of getting together in one-on-one conversations once a week. Tasha has built the entire community on creating a database of people, matching them up using algorithm and some human curation to have these wonderful conversations over the course of the last year and a half, primarily online. Every now and then they will create content with people in a webinar, or they will invite people into larger community gatherings. She was kind enough to do that for a couple of Idealist days. But an entire online community that is built mostly on people raising their hand to have one-on-one interactions with peers is pretty phenomenal, partly because, or the evidence of that, I would say, if you go and you or your listeners look, Misha, is on LinkedIn, if you follow Tasha and you follow the Nonprofit Hive, the number and variety of people who just spontaneously talk about what an incredible experience they've had and what wonderful people they've met and how resourced they feel by being in relation to each other is astounding for something that doesn't have what most people would think of as an online forum, a huge social media presence on other channels.
That's amazing. I'll make sure to link that in the show notes so we can follow along. And it's fascinating because I know you're a master connector and you have a network of wonderful people you are connected to, and you provide so much value to community members in general. We met at a conference and we've been in touch over the years, and I've seen you build out several different communities across LinkedIn, and it's been fascinating to see all of that. For leaders of nonprofits or for profits, just any organization that's listening that has a cause and a goal they're trying to get to, what is the specific focus or advice you would give them in terms of how they can build that community and that ecosystem of belonging in their organizations? Because I think the $1 million question is always, okay, I love what you're sharing. How can I do this for my organization?
I love that we're at this point and I get to bring up this musical number, which might not be where anybody thought that was going. There's a really fun musical that not many people have heard of. It's an off-Broadway show called Title of Show, and it is literally the journey of this group of actors and writers and singers as they start out off Broadway and get closer and closer to Broadway. And every time they got closer, including to up to when they actually were on Broadway, the story of their journey and how they got there and how they succeeded at going from being a little tiny group of actors who just had a dream to literally being on stage on Broadway in front of a sold out show, sold out house. They included that journey and the conversations they were having. That was literally the show. And my favorite song from that, and the thing that makes me feel like it's the most important piece of advice to give to anybody who's trying to get lots of people to care about what they're doing, is there's a great song called Nine People's Favorite Thing. And it's a refrain that says, I'd rather be nine people's favorite thing than 100 people's ninth favorite thing. And I think so many cause and impact related communities are doing their marketing and their outreach to be the most palatable version of themselves to the most people. And what happens when you are 100 people's ninth favorite thing is that nobody ever talks about their ninth favorite thing at parties. So you get talked about zero, even though you are on the radar of 100 people. But if you are nine people's absolute favorite, if you write the show, so to speak, for nine people who you know care about the most true version of what you're trying to accomplish, then you're going to have nine people talking about you all the time. And those nine people are going to talk to their friends in a way that gets them excited. And hopefully they will help the nine friends that they know that are the most excited about you to also talk about you. So if I would say one thing, it's to not talk to 100 people in a way that makes them makes you their ninth favorite thing. Think about the 9 times 9 of being nine people's absolute favorite thing that they're going to share with everybody around them all the time. Pick an identity, pick an aspiration, and be the kind of person who pulls other people along, or the kind of other organization who pulls people along. Go listen to that song, Nine People's Favorite Thing from Title of Show. I think it's the easiest piece and the most enjoyable piece of marketing advice most people will ever get.
I love it. I'm smiling as you're sharing this. And I'm thinking that this piece of advice applies to a lot of parts of life: job searches, personal branding, networking, just having this focus on quality versus quantity. And even if we look at influencer marketing, we talk a lot about micro influencers. So having that hyper engagement with a smaller group of people being more effective. Now, I know the pink elephant in the room as we talk about online communities and networking and building human connections is how generative AI is impacting all of this. Do you have a specific take on how Gen AI can augment this human connection we're trying to build online? Or do you have more skeptical opinions about it?
I personally started out from a pretty skeptical place, and I've definitely got a lot of concerns about sovereignty, about resource, about anything that happens where information is created in a black box and presented as an impeachable source of truth. All of those things make me a little, more than a little, make me pretty anxious, honestly. However, as somebody who likes to think about tools, and particularly if I go at this, Misha, from a place of how I use it personally, I'm a person who has a lot of parts that on a foundation of uncertainty, of that imposter syndrome bit. And what I have used generative AI for my own sort of personal ability to show up as the best version of myself is I will use it as a way to get a first read on something where I'm not sure, or to test an idea that I have. And I think the thing that I would say that I've done the most with regarding generative AI is I've used it to help me be curious faster and explore lots of different ideas that then, like any good scientist who starts with a hypothesis and then gets their first round of confirming data, then go deeper on my own and doing my own research and setting up my own sort of follow-up experiments and qualitative, quantitative exploration. But it has let me explore lots of ideas faster than I otherwise would have, and with more confidence that at least this is going to go somewhere interesting, and that I might be able to show up and have a more useful conversation with somebody like yourself if I can get grounded and curious a little bit faster.
I love that. I think curiosity is one of those overlooked superpowers, which is making its comeback. I've been working on a project myself that embeds curiosity. So I know it's great to use generative AI in a way that allows us to have sort of that exploratory phase. You and I are both people that we wear a lot of different hats. We work on multiple projects, different organizations and clients, different outcomes. All of it, I believe, comes together under this umbrella of social impact. I think what we're going to see definitely is even a deeper need for that human connection, because what we're seeing now is people are using these tools to replace some of that human connection we're longing for. So I definitely hope that we're going to be able to spread this message loud and clear about the importance of building those communities and create that sense of belonging and creating those safe spaces, because honestly, there's so much noise out there and all of us are trying to move forward with the best of our abilities and come up with campaigns and initiatives that matter and help job seekers and students get placed in those roles. And at the end of the day, I think just have fulfilled lives. And that is something I hope you and I and everyone else listening, we can talk more about. Like, how can we help the next generation live a life that feels fulfilled, where they grew up using social media, so it's part of their lives and it's embedded in their identities. But now we want them to have all these tools at their disposal and use them in a responsible way, like you said, use them in a curious way and just keep that empathy. So I love all of this. This resonates very heavily with me.
I'm smiling because I love what you said about a generation and how do we help them use social media and how do we help them use AI. And I think that's really key, is that we should be, as an ecosystem, as a human collection of people, we should be finding ways to use these tools and not be used by these tools. That we should be teaching people about agency and their relationship with these things rather than creating an entire generation of consumers who sit passively by. And I think that's the thing that's really exciting about the work that you do and the work that other people in social impact and social innovation do, is how do you change passivity into agency, particularly around these really powerful tools that if we can get more people to be agentic with them, not necessarily agentic AI, but just have agency and to realize the power they have when they grab the tools for themselves. That's a really powerful reframe. And I love how it just happened while you were talking about it. I want to have my own podcast now, Misha, so we can swap roles and I can ask you questions and learn about all these really awesome things you're doing.
Thank you. It's always great to talk to like-minded people that are doing work in the social impact space. I want to make sure I give you the mic and ask, is there anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
You asked and we covered it, but I would really like to distill this really lovely 3-word journey that I learned. It's been an undercurrent in all of our conversation. There's a wonderful woman named Allison Hewitt. I met her through the Center for Social Innovation in Canada, and her focus has really been on hope, agency, and belonging. And how do you weave those three things together? And I love those three words in relationship to each other, particularly in the work that we do at Idealist and with some of the other folks that I'm working with. The idea that hopelessness comes from feeling like you have no agency. If you feel like you've got no ability to affect the outcome, you lose hope. And how can we, as people who work in the impact space, people who have the ability to reach other people, how do we offer people some small sense of agency? How do we give them the smallest unit of something that they can do where they feel like they made the choice to do it and it happened? And therefore, you've given them the seed of hope that maybe they can do a little bit more. And if they find that they can do a little bit more, maybe they can find the other people who want to do that, and then they can belong to that community of people. And then they can act collectively and they can have hope collectively. So, hope, agency, and change as three things that we can all strive for to talk about in and mix into our messaging and our outreach and our actions feels really important and present for me right now.
Thank you for this really inspiring conversation today, Tim. And to my listeners, if this episode gave you something new to think about, please consider sharing it with a friend or a colleague who's ready to use digital for good. And don't forget to subscribe for more conversations like this. Until next time, thank you again, Tim. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thank you for inviting me, Misha. It was a lot of fun.